Welcome to the SLC3's third Diversity Series Town Hall, Pay When Paid and Retention Contract Provisions. My name is Francois Lyles Wiggins. I'm Assistant Airport Director at St. Louis Lambert International Airport in the Community Programs Department in the Business Diversity Development Office. And on behalf of the SLC3 Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, we're pleased to see you this morning. As always, we begin with a few housekeeping items. First, please make sure you are muted to eliminate distractions during this morning's program. We hope you are also free from distractions as much as you can be. We ask that all questions be sent through the chat feature on the bottom of your screen, and we will address those during our open session. You can also raise your hand and your question or comment will be addressed more immediately. Because this program is recorded, a copy of this program is available after the program. The Diversity Series is designed to be a town hall style format. We have asked our keynote speaker, Marvin Johnson with CMP, to share details about the issues of pay when paid. Kelly and I will help to monitor questions or those who raise their hand to speak and call you by name. Please take the time now to edit your names with your video to provide your first and last name and the company you represent. This will help us know who is here with us today and call you by name. As a reminder, we are a community of design and construction industry professionals with a common interest in the betterment of our region. Our planning committee has identified 4 key pillars for our organization: innovation, continuing education, equity empowerment, and all-inclusive workforce collaboration. I would like to acknowledge our Diversity Advancement Subcommittee for their support and help with developing our Diversity Series events, as well as our Diversity Workshop in November. Our chair is Jane McGowan with Alastazel. Our Diversity Committee Chair is Julie Ledbetter with Washington University, and our co-chair is Jeannie Brewster with SLC3. This committee has about 80 members. If you would like to join us, please reach out to SLC3 staff. We always seek your evaluations at the conclusion of each program. Please take a couple of minutes to answer a few quick questions. The program evaluations and comments are used to prepare for future programming, as well as determine the overall value of our education and networking programs for the year. We do take all evaluations seriously and always hope to improve on our programs. Your support is important, and it only takes a few minutes of your time to respond. As always, we have a packed calendar designed to meet the needs of our full membership. We are sure you will find program and events you want to mark on in your calendar. We do have our second part series on waging a counterattack on opioids in the workplace on May 24th. Note, this program is a webinar and not in person. For those who are interested, please register online. June 9th is an event you don't want to miss. It's our 50th celebration event. We hope that you will make sure you join our owner and associate members as we celebrate this tremendous milestone. Also, in June, our ever popular mid-year economic review webinar. Due to restrictions at the Federal Reserve, we are hosting this again virtually. June 23rd is the date on that. I understand it is free to members. Before our program begins, we want to take the time to give special recognition to our annual training and education program sponsors. Our annual platinum sponsor is Cosme Wagner. We appreciate their top tier support each year. Our gold sponsors are McGrath and Associates, Ross and Barazzini, Kwame Building Group, and L. Keeley. And our silver sponsors are Farnsworth Group, Kaiser Electric, JF Electric, Abner Engineering, HWH Architects, Custom Engineering, and Hush Blackwell. Thank you to all our sponsors. Now, before I turn this over to Jane to introduce today's key speaker, I would like to preface this discussion with appreciation of all of you being with us. Let's ensure we are respectful to one another, as we understand this is a sensitive topic, and we certainly want a productive conversation and give you a voice as in any town hall. Now we will first hear from Marvin for about 30 minutes. Next, we will hear from Corey Elliott, owner of CMT Roofing, to share her experiences with this issue. We invite others to share as well, including owners on what steps you are taking to improve the challenges, and from those who are like Corey and struggling to keep up with payroll due to payment delays and rejecting larger projects because of the risk of not being able to cover payroll when more labor is required. This ultimately is a workforce issue, and we want this forum to be productive and respect all sides of the issue.
Thanks so much, Fran. It's my pleasure to introduce you to our keynote speaker today, Marvin Johnson, CCA, CCP, NACA, Senior Member of Construction Management Partners, LLC. Marvin has 36 years of construction project management experience. His senior level management, operations, and construction audit expertise has contributed to the placement of over $5 billion worth of construction in the St. Louis metropolitan area and the surrounding Midwest and Southeast regional markets. Marvin currently serves as senior member of Construction Management Partners, LLC, or CMP. CMP is a professional consulting firm specializing in the areas of project management, including owners' representatives, construction audit and advisory, and diversity program management services. Specialty markets include healthcare, higher education, corporate facilities, and major league sports. Marvin's education includes a Bachelor in Business Management from California Coast University and Amos Tuck School of Business Administration at Dartmouth. He also attended Kellogg Graduate School of Management at Northwestern University Business Management, John Cook School of Business at St. Louis University Supply Chain Management, and St. Louis Community College at Merrimack with a major in architecture. Marvin belongs to a number of associations, including the SLC3. So thank you so much, Marvin, and let's all give a warm welcome to Marvin Johnson. Thank you, Marvin.
Good morning to all. And I appreciate the intro. We probably could have picked up 10 minutes of presentation time, but I do appreciate that. So I've got 30 minutes this morning, and let me first say welcome to all of you that have taken the time out of your schedule to be with us this morning. Being an entrepreneur, I'm very aware of how valuable our time is, and we must be productive in how we select to use that time. I'm going to run through a few slides this morning to talk about this very critical issue of dealing with pay when paid contract provisions. It is something that it's not new to any of us. It's been around as part of this industry longer than the 37 years that I've been in it. And so it is nothing new. However, the way we choose and are forced to navigate through it and adjust sometimes our business models to deal with it, it varies. So, and I hope to be part of the spirited discussion after we get through this. And I'm going to leave you with some tips on how you can address your particular issues, strategies that you can employ within your own organization, to deal with it, because it is not going away. It is not likely to be modified in terms of how the Missouri courts deal with it. So it's going to be incumbent upon us to structure, in some cases, restructure our business models from how we deal with our owners to how we deal with our CMs to how we deal with our primes, and if we are prime accordingly. So next slide, please. I thought it's always interesting to, and I'm not going to read this slide, but it's always good to throw something out at the audience, because sometimes you don't necessarily know, who you're dealing with, what their background is, and whether or not they, represent some competent information. And so I've been in the industry for 37 years, and this is just sort of a piece of some of my specialty core competencies, and you will get this. So if you want to read this in detail, you can do that at a later date. Next slide. As part of talking to you about the issue of pay when paid, you need to understand that I see it from a lot of different angles. I can see it from the owner's angle. I see it from the CM, whether we're at risk or whether we're for fee. I see it from the financial construction auditor or financial responsibility viewpoint. So there are a lot of prisms in terms of how this issue protects the project, but yet how do we use it to help protect us? So my experience on these are a couple of key, really large signature projects that I always like to put out there, just so for those that may wonder, where's this guy coming from, and is he qualified to talk to us about this issue? I am uniquely qualified to do that. Next slide. Construction is one of the highest DSOs. A DSO, it just means days sales outstanding, the same as accounts receivable. So some people use those terms interchangeably, but we have one of the highest and longest DSOs out of all the US industries. In 2019, the average DSO for construction companies was about 83 days. That means it took nearly 3 months to collect on the average account. Next slide, please. I love to deal in statistics. So if you know me, if you've ever been in any part of my sessions, you always get the statistics first, right? Because how do we make decisions? How do we increase our level of management effectiveness without having data, right? Whether you get your own data or you use somebody else's data, right? As published in the National Construction Payment Record, in Q1 of 2020, there was a survey of 540 construction professionals. They found that 80% of construction businesses spend a significant portion of their time during the week seeking payment for their work. And I think everybody on this call probably understands that that number may even be higher than 80%, but that's what this particular study found. Less than 40% of contractors and subcontractors, say that. I can't read that other piece because of the anyway, they're longer than 30 days out on their invoices. More than 60% of all the contractors that they spoke with said that they routinely have invoices that exceed 60 days. That's normal. I think if we all talk to one another very candidly, 60 days is normal. 90 days may not be normal, but it is fairly routine. Most common construction disputes, and I was in a program last night where I was part of a panel, and we talked about construction claims and disputes. But this particular study, talked about these particular disputes that arise from contractors or owners failing to understand and comply with contractual payment obligations. Next slide. If you're a contractor, subcontractor, supplier, doesn't even matter. If you're in the industry, you likely have heard the term pay if paid or pay when paid, right? There is a difference, and there are two of them, right? These payment provisions are some of the most controversial and heavily negotiated and litigated provisions within our industry, right? You need to know that, right? When reviewing contracts, particularly your contract that contains whether it's pay if paid or pay when paid provisions, it's important to verify, and you have to do this on your own, right? To verify the enforceability of these provisions under the applicable laws in the state where you live in. In our case, it's Missouri. So you need to go and understand the enforceability of these, because just because they're in your contract doesn't necessarily mean that they're enforceable. Not surprisingly, these provisions are a topic of legislation throughout the United States, with some states going so far as to ban their use. Next slide. Thank you. A pay when paid clause, right? What is pay when paid? You may not necessarily in your contract see the words pay when paid, right? It's the inference and the language around that makes the provision pay when paid. A pay when paid contract clause is a payment condition that establishes a reasonable time for the contractor to comply with its duty to make payment to a subcontractor or supplier for work performed from the date of an invoice or upon the contractor's receipt of payment from the owner. So you saw that to either or, right? Pay when paid clauses do not excuse an unpaid prime from its obligations to pay the valid invoices of subcontractor suppliers or any other sub-tiers, right? In the event the owner fails to pay the GC or the CM, the contractor still has a duty to pay the subcontractor within a reasonable period of time, or, there's that word again, or as stated in the subcontract agreement. I don't really like reasonable period of time. So make sure when you're talking to your primes or your owners that you deal with that term reasonable period of time, and you be very clear and unambiguous about that, right? So make sure it's stated. Next slide, please. All right, pay if paid, which I don't see often, but it's out there. And some contractors or primes, they'll take a pay when paid and try to enforce it as if it's a pay if paid. So that's why you have to know, right? Pay if paid clauses, they alter the common law payment obligation by requiring payment from the owner as a condition precedent to the contractor's duty to pay a subcontractor or supplier. A condition precedent is an act or event other than a lapse of time that exists or occurs before a duty to perform something promised arises. So in other words, pay if paid clauses mean the contractor is only obligated to pay the subcontractor or other sub-tiers if it receives payment for subcontractors' work from the owner. So know the difference, right? It's your responsibility as the business person to know the difference. It is not the primes or the CM or the owner's responsibility to explain that to you, to the point that you can understand whether or not you need to make a decision based on that language or not. Next slide, please. So I'm moving pretty fast here. So, and I'm not going to go through this, but understand that there are court cases out there. This particular one was out of New York, where they challenged the enforceability of a pay when paid clause. Now, one of the things that I know everybody on this call is probably interested in talking about, and that is, well, how do we move beyond the pay when paid clause and move into early accelerated pay, the different terminologies for that, right? So, but we can talk about that once we get through this, and I think Corey may have something to say about that, or maybe even Kelly and Ron. So we can talk about that. I've got a lot of opinions and information because I work around the country, and what I see in many cases is very different from what we have here in St. Louis. Many state courts have rendered pay if paid provisions void and unenforceable, right? So know where we are within the state of Missouri. Next slide, please. You know, this is a huge danger sign here, right? So as you think about some of the early takeaways from this, realize that there's a danger. There's a danger in when dealing with pay when paid or pay if paid provisions, but you have to know that, and you have to account for that in your go or no go evaluations to determine if you are going to pursue a project or accept a contract or, you know, move forward with that, right? One of the things I said last night on the panel, that disputes generally arise as a result of a misunderstanding, right? One party didn't get an understanding of what the other party was saying, or it wasn't properly communicated or documented. And so to avoid a misunderstanding, and many of you have heard me say this, to avoid a misunderstanding, always get an understanding. And it doesn't matter how simple the issue is. You know, one of the things that we fail to do most often is get that understanding. Next slide. So again, some more information about, you know, pay when paid. So some of the things that you need to make sure that you do, right? One, define what constitutes a reasonable period of time. I mentioned that early. Don't accept just the reasonable period of time. You know, many subcontracts will state 7 days, 10 days, 30 days, right? Whether you agree with those time periods or not, but they do state it, right? But others are a little more ambiguous. Expressly state that payment by the owner is not a precedent to the contractor's duty to pay you, right? Because some of them will use, even though we all know it's customary, when the owner pays, we'll pay you 7 days, 10 days. If the owner doesn't pay, well, I can't pay you because the owner didn't pay. So understand what your rights are in that situation, and make sure that you have proper legal counsel, right, you know, with you, so that they help you understand on the front end, so you can attempt to avoid and manage that risk in the first place, right? When reviewing contracts, in many cases, subcontracts containing such language, it's important to verify the enforceability of those provisions under the state of Missouri. Next slide, please. CMs and prime contractors will typically use pay when paid clauses to condition their obligation to pay you. Many of you have experienced that, and I'm sure you will probably voice some of that here. But you know, many states have enacted the Prompt Payment Act. So if you've never heard of the PPA Prompt Payment Act, go look it up. Go look it up. 49 out of 50 states have enacted the Prompt Payment Act, right? Prompt Payment Act, which is the federal government program that many states have enacted, generally provides legal recourse against owners or contractors who fail to meet payment obligations required by the construction contract. Make sure your construction contract is clear and unambiguous. You can use the PPA, and you cannot be afraid, right? One of the biggest problems we have is we're afraid to go chase our money, right? We'll tell everybody else in the city, I'm not getting paid except the people that owe you the money, because many times you're afraid when you say that, then they're going to blackball you. You won't get any more work, or, you know, a whole myriad of things. You know, my answer to that, well, then why'd you get into the contract in the first place? Right? You have to be aggressive and going to get your money. You know, early on in my career, I turned into the best collection agent that I knew. I wanted your FedEx number. Here's mine. FedEx the check. What time is it ready? I'm coming to pick it up. I'm sending, you know what I mean? Go get your money. Next slide, please. Go look at the Prompt Payment Act, please. And so often, you know, we get into the situation because we've been told to what? Trust me. I'll take care of you. I'll pay you every 2 weeks, right? I'll pay you on the first of the month, you know, whatever that might be. You know what I mean? The two most dangerous words in our industry is trust me. And I don't care how long you've been knowing the individual, the organization, the two most dangerous words in the industry is trust me. Next slide. So mitigating some of our contract issues, in my mind, can be simple, right? If we follow some basic steps, right? Where does mitigating your potential risk with payments and having the right language and understanding, where does that start in the process? Well, it just simply starts at the beginning, right? Make sure you offer the completed competitive bid that you were supposed to. Define all clarifications and exclusions, right? Make sure that you go through and engage in a post-bid and de-scoping process for whatever you propose to do, whether it was professional services or trade contractor. Be very thorough. Don't let someone else tell you what your scope is. You tell them what your scope is. Be thorough about it. Ask questions early and often. Get that understanding. Request a copy of the drawings and the master schedule. Some of us put proposals together. I don't know how. We put proposals and everything together, and we haven't even seen the drawings. We haven't been to the site. We haven't seen the schedule. So we don't know, whether or not we're working adjacent to an occupied space or some other subs, and how that sequencing is going to occur, which impacts your proposal. Next slide, please. Additional ways to mitigate, right? Get all your change directives in writing, right? Never embark on change order work without the signed PCO work order, whatever it is on the site that they're using for their control. Do not agree to perform work without that written one, right? Use the agreed upon unit cost for your changes, right? Make sure you have unit cost in your contract. Don't let anybody say, well, we'll deal with that later. Agree on the additional work before you proceed, right? We're talking mitigating those issues. Always consult with competent legal counsel. The time to do that is not when you get the contract in your hand to call us up and say, hey, you got a lawyer that you can recommend to us, right? Confirm your scope and your price. Again, agree on the unit cost for changes, agree on the schedule, sequencing, delivery, and turnover strategy. You need to know all of that because it all impacts you. Sometimes primes and CMs, they play around with us with our payments because they just don't think we know any better. It's not that they can't pay sometimes. And there's a different situation in every single project. I'm just telling you what I've seen. There are instances where they play around with us because they know we don't know. And make sure you understand the prime flow down provisions, right? Did you ask that prime for a redacted copy of his contract with the upper tier or with the owner, so you know what those provisions are that will ultimately impact you payment wise or anything else? You didn't know that you had the right to ask for that, but you do. Next slide, please. Here we are, takeaways. What I want you to take away from this thing, and go back to your office and do some work, get on this stuff and go get your money. Read your contract thoroughly. Always consult competent legal counsel. And going back to number one, don't just look at the scope and look at the dollar amount to make sure they put the lump sum dollar amount in there that matches what you gave them. Yes, you need to do that. But there's 30, 40 other pages in that agreement that you need to read and have your counsel read, right? Make sure you confirm in scope and price. Define all the T&Cs, terms and conditions. Be clear and unambiguous. To the extent you are not clear and your contract is ambiguous, you open yourself up to all sorts of issues and problems that down the road, you are not in a defensible position, even legally. Okay? Establish all of your manpower, work plans. You got to know what it's going to take to get that job done. Know when your peaks and valleys are. Know your long lead items. You got to schedule that stuff. It's not the prime's responsibility to know your work and tell you where to be, when to be there, how to staff it. It's your responsibility. But make sure that you agree on the schedule and the sequencing. And when something happens that impacts you, document it. Document it. Send it over. You've impacted my schedule. Next slide. Again, I'm going to say it again. Read, right? Review all the applicable flow down provisions. If you don't know what they are, ask for that contract. I mean, it's okay if they, redact it out so that there's certain, you don't want to see their numbers per se, but it's all the other, potentially harmful language that impact that flows down to you that you need to know about, right? Don't get caught up in the hype of the opportunity. And many times we get caught up in that because it's a large project. We're already thinking about the next BMW that we want to buy, right? Because, oh, here's a project opportunity. And they said, I'm going to get this, I'm going to get paid every week or every 2 weeks. And you get caught up in the hype, right? And that's just like walking into a snake den and you didn't happen to pay attention. There were snakes down there. You will get bit, right? And as auditors, the first thing we learn before we are approved to be an auditor, we learn to trust but verify. I don't have a problem trusting, but guarantee you, I'm gonna verify everything you tell me. And if that hurts your feelings, let me apologize in advance. Always have a plan and how you're gonna cash flow that contract. Because just because it may be in the agreement, and they may tell you we're gonna pay you, but if they don't, what is your contingency plan? Do you have cash? How many days on hand of cash do you have for your business? And if you tell me 3 days, I'm likely to tell you, you probably don't need to be on this contract. So that's something that we help a lot of people with along the way. If that's something that you want to talk about offline, give me a call. You need to know how many days on hand of cash you have. How do you build that? How do you build that? I get emails all the time. I went through the PPP program, just like many of you did. And you may not know this, but there are still millions of dollars out there. It's not PPP, but it's still disaster relief funds that if you're in good standing with the SBA and the federal government, you fill out what amounts to be not even a half a page of application. 5 days, the money's in your account. I don't know if you knew that or not, but it's out there. Next slide. I think we're getting to the end. Again, to avoid a misunderstanding, always get an understanding. If you don't have an understanding, keep asking questions. I need you to clarify this. I need an explanation. I hear what you're saying, but I don't read it. Right? There's a danger in not getting that understanding. Next slide. As an entrepreneur, it is very easy to be different, right? Everybody wants to be different. Very easy to be different. However, it is very difficult to be better, right? And my goal is to be better than the man that's sitting next to me, right? Better in how I manage my company, manage my cash flow, manage my collections, manage my contracts, manage my relationship, with the owners and with the primes. And it's okay to have a relationship with the owner. It is okay with that. It's okay to be a prime and have a direct relationship with the owner. Well, that's what the primes do. They go establish a relationship with the owner so that they have that direct line of cash from the owner's account to theirs. And then you are considered a bottom feeder. Now, I don't mean to hurt anybody's feelings with that, but that's what, if you're not directly connected with the owner as a prime, you're a bottom feeder, right? So how do you start to balance that, right? And elevate so that you have some relationships directly with the owner, because that also, improves your cash flow. So take a look at all of those things. I hope I've said some things that have been helpful to you, right? We've got a lot of work to do out here, guys. This industry is not about to change tomorrow. So, what is it that we need to do to improve ourselves, improve our processes, and working with our owners and working with our primes so we can continue to build sustainable businesses. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marvin. That was a great presentation, very beneficial. We thank you for your time. I believe Corey Elliott wanted to speak. If Corey, would you like to speak, please?
Yeah, so I think on the agenda, though, there were questions
Okay.
after following his presentation. And I saw a couple in the chat, but if someone wants to, read those, or if other people want to ask questions related to his presentation before I start.
Okay, let's see.
There's a question in the chat from Abner Engineering. How do we collect underpaid, pay when paid contracts without risking future business? Marvin?
Well, I guess my question is are you looking at and banking on future business to get paid now? Do you want to get paid now? Do you want to live in the now, or leverage? I mean, or do you really think you're leveraging? I mean, I think it's a misconception actually to think that if you collect your money or exhibit any aggression is not the right word, but any force to collect your money, that somehow you're not going to get business anymore. To me, I think the folks on the other end should respect you more, for having the fortitude to be able to do that.
So I know that Nicole is more than able to speak for herself, but in reality, Marvin, when we do ask for, for payment, or when we push, or when we go back to the contracts, even when there have been, and these are part of my comments too, you do get pushback. And then the next time you do bid, or you become a problem, right, on the project, because you're asking to be paid, or you're requesting to be paid, then yes, you do risk future work with those clients. And none of us are wanting to work. I mean, for my company, our model is not to work with every general contractor. We want to work with owners, and we want to work with a group that we work with for the next 10, 15, 20 years, right?
Exactly.
And it can be where, we've had a great relationship with a GC, but then we get on a contract with an owner and there's an issue or whatever, and then all of a sudden we're the problem, and then we're not on their preferred list, I think is the spirit of the question that she's.
Yeah. And I get it. I get it. And each of us have to make those individual decisions for our business. We absolutely do. And one situation will never be the same as the next situation. I personally have had to walk away from owners because it was 90 days. And I just didn't have the liberty to ask myself, do I want to risk future business because they listed all these other projects that they had in the pipeline. But for me and my program, I can't risk the future by saying, pay me when you can.
Nicole has her hand up.
Nicole.
Yeah, thank you. So I also wanted to ask a clarification. So thank you, Corey. You definitely captured the essence of what my concern was. And I think it's very different on private work versus public work. When you have a client that maybe makes up 30% or more of your income in certain markets, you really, and that's why I asked that question. Very honestly, it's very difficult to push back too much without risking future work. But you mentioned towards the end, did you talk about PPP to cover? Is that what I heard you say, or what? Maybe I misunderstood.
No, I mentioned, I said that there are still disaster relief funds out there, Nicole, but they're not they're not the typical PPP loans that many of us did receive and were forgiven. I'm saying that I'm aware that there are still disaster relief funds out there that, and I don't know if anybody else has received any. I mean, you know, we get emails all the time just about those funds.
And
So
the reason,
that's what I was saying.
okay, and the reason why I asked that is also, again, for some of us who are public contractors and consultants, one of the things that we found is it's nice for back to what you were saying about temporary cash flow, it's great, but for future opportunities, sometimes that can affect your like your what is it, your rate that you charge, because the federal government and some other entities will count that as income. And so it actually works against you in the long run, even though it can help in the short run.
Absolutely. And I think the caveat there, Nicole, which when you asked the question, you know, I didn't ask, are you referring to public work or private work? Because you're spot on. There's different criteria on the public side. I don't work on the public side, so obviously I'm not going to necessarily have that same experience. But you are correct. I mean, there's just all sorts of regulations on the public side that impact how you collect the money. And when they send you a contract on the public side, and they don't really care what your opinion is about the language in there.
You know, and on the public side, honestly, it should be easier because they actually already have all the money for the project. And so changing, you know, the approach, and, you know, I hope that, you know, city, county, you know, others, you know, are on here, because really we should not always have to ask for special payment terms, because that also puts you, unfortunately, at a disadvantage on projects, and then GCs or owners start to question if you can do it or blah, blah, blah. You know, but from a public side, I mean, you know, getting the people who write the checks to change that, I think is really honestly the best approach, because the money's already there. And so, you know, creating, you know, loan funds or mobilization funds basically is telling, you know, contractors to basically borrow money to fund their projects, right? And at a higher rate usually than what they're borrowing the money from. So if we can change those things up front, then you don't need things like loan funds and things like that, because we know that we're going to get paid every 10 days or every 10th of the month or 15th of the month or whatever. And even with projects that, while it may be a private owner, but they're getting incentives in some way, whether it's tax abatement, tax credits, whatever, you know, same thing should apply. They're getting all of the benefit of the work at the expense of us paying for it.
I agree. You know, the programs like the loan fund and other things that we've seen come in and out of St. Louis, you know, I could go back well into the 90s and probably list, you know, 5 or 6 of those loan funds, and they've come in and come out just like a storm will. And, you know, I'm always surprised as to, you know, why we keep reinventing that. It's something that we do keep reinventing, but I've yet to see the real fruits that I think we would like to see from that, whether that's public or private. I think there's another question.
More questions.
Ron Unterreiner asks, what is a reasonable amount of time for a second-tier subcontractor to expect payment for their work?
I mean, reasonable is one of those subjective terms, Ron. You know, you can say 10 days, and one person may say 10 days is reasonable, and someone else may say 30 days, you know, is reasonable. What if you are in a position to have a conversation about your subcontract at a second tier level, you want to state 10 days, you know, try to get an agreement of, and again, I'm talking private work, you know, to the extent that you have it, you know, try to state whether it's 15 days or 20 days, or it's because if you ever end up in a legal situation, you know, you don't want your lawyer or someone else's lawyer to try to define what reasonable should have represented.
And the next question, Steve Lewis with the AGC of Missouri. How does a subcontractor communicate with an owner about their payment from a general contractor without being accused of tortious interference?
That's very difficult to do, Steve. And I think I understand the basis of that question. And many lower tiers will not cross that line. You know, we've been told, well, you know, the owner doesn't have a contract with that sub, so they really can't have that conversation. However, you know, a couple of the owners that we work with, they want to know. Now, you know, some owners don't really want to know. They want to stay at arm's length, you know, away from that. I mean, that's very deliberate. But, you know, I work with, you know, I mean, one of the bigger owners in St. Louis that I work with, they want to know. I mean, BJC Healthcare, they want to know if somebody is not getting paid. You know, I don't think that's the norm, but that's the case. But in a normal basis, Steve, you know, I know if I'm at a lower level, I'm not going to want to you know, compromise anything contractually by going over the head of my prime. And you know, I would have to try to lean back to, you know, did I have any sort of relationship with that prime prior to entering into that agreement? Was that my first time doing business with them, you know, or not? Do I have any history where they've paid me and they've put their word out there and they've kept their word? You know, it becomes, you know, if it's the first time, you're exposed. Maybe it works out, maybe it don't. But hopefully, you know, as part of our due diligence as small business people, you know, we have to make those decisions early on. And sometimes we make the decision with very limited information. I'm going to take this subcontract, or I'm not going to take it.
John Foreman had his hand up.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I think every time I move, my hand goes up on my screen, so I'm trying not to move. But yeah, I hear what everybody's saying, and I agree. I think it's an individual decision, you know, as you're basically trying to decide the relationship you have with the contractor or the owner. You know, I think you have to decide how hard to push that issue. I think if you go, I don't think it hurts to go and say, hey, I can't go 90 days without being paid. I need to be paid within 30 days. You know, and they may agree to that, or they may say 45 days or negotiate. And then I think it's a matter of how hard you push and what your relationship is with them, you know, and what that future work is and how important that is to you. Because it is a hard decision. And I think, you know, you go to the contractor you work for, you know, if you're a sub, and try to negotiate that as well. And then it's just, okay, how hard do I push? Do I take this job or not take it? And those are, you know, tough decisions when you're trying to get work. So,
yeah. And, you know, I believe in general, the owners care whether or not the smaller lower tier subs are getting paid or not. You know, I believe that. But I do understand that there are protocols, there are hierarchies, there are, you know, the lines of authority and communication, and it becomes difficult to navigate that sometimes. Maybe the owners, you know, can communicate that maybe a little bit differently to to the CMs and have the CM flow it down to the primes, that it's important for you to pay, the smaller firms timely, and because sometimes the primes don't want you to say anything. They don't want the owner to know they didn't pay you. So it's not necessarily always whether or not it's going to damage their relationship. They don't want the owner to know.
Steve Sobo with Washington University has his hand up.
Hey,
Yeah,
Steve.
good morning, Fran. How are you? And Marvin?
Good
Hey,
morning.
I'm just jumping in because John hit the nail on the head with the word relationship. At WashU, and Vern can help me, but Roz knows our system, Ralph knows our system. And then I've been talking to Greg Moeller lately because he's trying to improve the BJC process on the system we've been using for 20 years, which is direct pay. We have that we have the GC, CM, et cetera, tease out the progress statement from the smaller first and, soon to be second tier subs. We pay them directly. And, we've been getting them that money within, less than 30 days normally. There is no 60, there is no 90. We know we need to move money fast to keep people in business because there's a lot of cash flow issues out there we see. And if we're truly going to help these smaller firms develop and grow, not that we're the contractor loan fund as we do it, but we're really trying to help move money to the market because again, relationship is the key. We all grew up together in this small town.
Right.
That's what it is. Being a local owner in St. Louis, we all know each other. We all grew up together. But I've been put on the spot over the years and, at the ASA conference of why can't you get us paid faster? But at the same time, I'm like, call me.
Right.
If you're having an issue, call me and we'll get you paid faster.
Yeah.
That's, how we are able to roll at WashU and, Vern can chime in too, but the key is it's that relationship and it shouldn't be a problem if a sub comes to us directly and asking for help. That's what we do because we're trying to help companies grow and long-term it benefits all of us because if we have more resources, more contractors, that's good for us because we're continuing to build and we'll continue to be able to get projects done. But if we don't pay or if we see people that aren't getting paid and they go out of business, that again hurts all of us. So we're in this together. And we do have a lot of contract language that helps, navigate through that process. And again, we're trying to help Moeller at BJC because they're trying to figure out how to do that. They can only, right now, their system only allows them to pay the GC, not the first and second tier sub. So,
Yeah. Well,
So I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
So if I can add to that, so, we truly want to pay the contractors so that they can pay their subcontractors, even to the point where during the pre-construction meetings, we are going through exactly what those subcontractors need to do in order to get paid properly. We give them very specific information so that everybody knows, when you submit your pay application, this is what you need, PCOs and change orders. Here's exactly what you need because it's in a contract with our GC, but it doesn't necessarily get transferred to those subcontractors. So in order to help expedite the process with those change orders, we are actually going through and saying, here's what we need. Also, when a subcontractor sends his pay application into the owner, typically what happens is, because I've seen it, is they're not getting paid. Well, it's not necessarily for our standpoint because we get audited. We have all of these projects and so our paperwork has to be correct. So if the pay application isn't correct, it gets returned to the general contractor. And if it's a subcontractor issue, you should be contacting the subcontractor and so forth to get it fixed. So it's really, Steve's talking about that 30 days, really that 30 days is from the approved pay application. We want to pay. And I'm not kidding. I have called, and I recently did it 2 days ago. I called a contractor and asked him if I could please pay him because he is not submitting the the paperwork correctly. He changed the entire AIA document to try to get a pay app taken care of. So one of the things that I recommend to a subcontractor is when you ask for payment from a GC, ask them if the pay app's been approved. If the pay app's been approved, great. Our contract states that they should be paid within 10 days from when they're paid. That would be another good question for the subcontractor to ask. In your contract, what does it say? So that you know, again, now you're communicating, just like Marvin was saying. You know, now you know the answer. Now you don't have to ask. So now it's really, have you been paid? If the answer is yes, great, then you should be expecting your payment. If the answer is no, typically the answer from the contractor to the subcontractor is, well, WashU hasn't paid yet. That should not be an acceptable answer. The acceptable answer is, why is it being held up? And typically it's because the pay app submittal was incorrect and had to be returned. And I'm not kidding. I have a pay app from November that the contractor cannot get it right. And so we had to sit down with them and go through it to try to get it rectified. And finally it did. It took 3 months to get that pay app correct. For no reason. How long has the AIA document been out there?
Well, forever,
I've been in the business for 40 years.
forever.
It's been there for at least 40 years.
Mhm.
So again, just I don't know, some advice. Just make sure that when you're asking about getting paid, and the owners in the GC says, well, I haven't been paid by WashU yet, so I'm not paying you. And obviously the next question, and we want to hear from subcontractors. We're partners with all these people, you know. So if there's an issue, I'm more than willing to listen to anybody that has an issue, and we'll help try to get it resolved.
As I
We
stated,
have a-
there are many owners that want to know when there are issues. WashU is one of them, and understand there's due diligence there on everybody's part. And you know, hopefully you're never forced into calling the owner, but you just heard Steve and Vern said they want to hear, you know, they want to know.
Caven Swan has a question in the chat box. Can you talk about retention and who can reasonably request release or reduction of retention?
Caven, good to hear from you. Good to hear your name. I'll take the first stab at the retention. You know, that's a very broad subject, and that really starts at what's going on with the GMP terms and conditions between the owner and the CM. Those conditions, usually provisions will flow down, right? Is the owner allowing the CM to reduce, to go from 10 to 5 at 50%, right? Or go down to 2.5 at 50%. You know, you don't know unless you understand what those flow down provisions are, first of all. And then secondly, you know, if you're one of those early trades, right, that's into the project and you finish and there's still 24 months, you know, remaining, right? What you want to do as part of your due diligence, right, before you start, make the retention, you know, part of your T&Cs, right? My schedule calls for me to be done, right, in 6 months. And can I bill for my retention after all of my work has been complete and certified, right? Again, that becomes and it will be different on every single project, right? There may be some best practices around that, but, you know, starting with the owner, and many times, you know, the owners will make sure that they have appropriate language that deals with the lower tiers. But again, the project manager that works for the CM, you know, depending on his mindset, because a lot of times he will drive some of that, you know, the owner will allow it, but the PM won't allow it. So, you know, you want you want to try to understand what those flow down, provisions are with respect to retention, and that's where it starts.
Did we want to hear, I'm not sure if we had any other questions, but I know we've got a lot of owners on here. We've got the county. Corey, I don't know if you wanted to add some stuff, but if anyone wants, besides questions, any comments or talk about anything that they may be doing in regards to payment, we welcome any kind of comments as well.
Hey, Gene, sorry, to jump in.
Yeah.
I was looking at Ron's note. So think about the group that's on this call, Ron. As owners, we've got the leverage. We've got to stop letting the GCs have the leverage. We're the ones that are pushing the money. So if there's a GC that suddenly tells a sub first, second, third tier, they can't work for them anymore because they called the owner directly, that's where us owners then need to engage and talk to that GC about, well, then you won't work for the owner anymore. I mean, that's the dynamic. And that's why, Kelly and I talk about what can SLC3 do to really make an influence in this area. That's where this group needs to band together to say enough. The GC should not have leverage in this case. They should be on the same page as we are, and they should be fine with subs calling us if there's an issue. But to suddenly banish a company from future work because they called the owner, and that's unacceptable. And that's what I'm saying. If this group starts rallying together and become more of a united force as owners, I think that's the part that also we can affect.
And Steve, I respect that. The problem, I think, is that there's so many layers. So if most of the minority firms I work with work on a second tier or third tier basis. So it's not the GC. They have to, the questions they ask have to go to their prime contract. So they're asking the subcontractor. And I will tell you, the answer is no immediately. And they really get no help. So they have very little access to an owner, and nor do they feel like they do. And I would tell you, most of the second or third tier subs, if they go to the GC, then their relationship with that prime sub they're working for is over with. It's just as simple as that. And I agree with you, Steve, wholeheartedly. I would love to see the ASA and the Subcontracting Association take more of a stance in this, because I think it's a major problem. The second and third tier people really do not have a voice in the industry. And those are just the people I work with. I'm working with the smaller minority firms. I mean, there's a few minority firms in town that do work as a prime sub. They have more of an access to the GC. Most of the subs I work with don't have access to even the GC, let alone the owner. And I know what you're saying, Steve, and I would love that. I would love to be able to tell my subs that I'm working with, hey, call Steve Sobel at WashU. He would love to hear from you. And I think you would, Steve. And I do respect that part of it. But unfortunately, he would be killed by all the people.
But again, I mean, others that are on the call. I mean, Steve Lewis is here from AGC. So, how can the AGC get involved? Because that's the next layer. How can they help subs realize? And also, the first tier prime sub, if they start losing their resources because, again, they're treating them poorly, it's just going to domino. So the game needs to change. And I think there's a lot of potential influence in the room, not just WashU, but AGC's in the room. You're in the room, others are in the room. How do we get to where we have an open dialogue, again, to get this to where it's going to benefit all? And we've got to stop playing games, because the problem's just going to continue to exacerbate, and we're never going to, have a more diverse pool of subcontractors if we treat them poorly. We, meaning, the first tier prime, I get that it's a very competitive industry, but at the same time, what's the big picture goal here? And that's the word that needs to get out, that we've got to start working as a group and stop treating people poorly in order to benefit all.
Well, Steve, there are several general contractors that have diversity professionals as a member of their teams. And I would encourage any of the specialty contractors that have concerns to reach out to the diversity professionals, you see many on the call today, that they've built relationships with, to provide them information and input about concerns they have. And I think that might be a way to resolve that issue before something becomes much more contentious.
Nate Adams with St. Louis County has his hand raised.
Good morning, all. Hopefully you all can hear me. I've had computer problems today, but I've taken it all in. Marvin, it's good to see you and hear your voice. I tend to, for some reason, Steve, I don't know why, Mr. Sobo, but I tend to go along with what you're saying. I think, and I'm only speaking from St. Louis County position at this time. I've been in the private sector previously, but if we have an issue with a sub getting paid, prior to our ordinance in 18, there was kind of that, well, we don't deal with subcontractors, but now there's an ordinance in place and we have rules and regs in our contract documents. I put this in the chat box. If you have a problem getting paid, we have B2G now, which requires the prime to acknowledge payment from St. Louis County, and he has to pass those payments on in a timely fashion. And if you don't get that, I do think that it's incumbent upon us to, as the owner's rep, to make sure everyone gets paid on the job. We're paying the GCs. The subs can't continue to carry the project, finance it for certain individuals, the GCs that don't like pay. And I'm not going to say all GCs are like that, because we have some GCs in St. Louis County, and our program is not that big, but they don't have a problem doing and complying with all the rules and regulations as far as prompt pay, and they do that. If the prime contractor is not paying promptly with St. Louis County, we're starting to enforce the Prompt Pay Act as it has been written, that you have the right to withhold payment to that general contractor. And until, like Mr. Sobo said, until we start doing a lot of that as owners and letting everyone know that everyone wants to be treated fairly. And that's just the bottom line. Getting back to Marvin, I don't believe I've ever read a contract when he said, beware of trust me. I don't think I've ever seen a contract that has the word trust in it. I mean, so that right there says, well, it's not about trust because it's not in the contract. And I know from Nicole's position, and Corey did explain it, the spirit of it, but I just don't know if I could ever want to continue to work for someone who does not want to pay me. I think at some point I have to make a decision as a business owner. Is this one of the contractors I want to work for? And I would concentrate my efforts on some. And I know it's a tough position because you're getting work and you want to try to hold that. But if he doesn't deep down want to pay you for the work you've done, you can't continue to do that. If you have 5, 6 contractors like that, it may be kind of tough. So I just never been a proponent of pay would get paid. I've said this previously. I almost don't care if you never get your money, but I would want mine. If I did work for you, I would still want my money. And I still think at some point we have to get into the lien position. And well, do I need to file a lien to protect my assets? So those are some of the things that we're trying to encourage in St. Louis County. And I know this is not the time, but I might as well tell people because it's on the horizon. Well, it's actually out in the street. The police, 2 county police precincts are out on the street for those who are interested. And thanks for your time, Fran and Kelly and everyone else on the call.
Thank you, Nate.
We got a hand raised from Nicole Alawali, and then we'll take Brian Hosher with MSD, and then Rosalind Croft with Tarleton. So Nicole?
Thank you. Steve, I really appreciate your comments and just want to emphasize that you're right. It takes a lot of voices, but I think, and part of that though is initially owners recognizing what Corey said, which is we shouldn't have to ask. And so if owners, and some do, there are many on this call who we have been able to interact with over time, because they have a system in place where a sub of any tier can call and find out what's going on. And when you have that in place and everybody knows that that's a good way to get around and for a sub to understand what's going on. But on the other hand, if more owners would, who, especially those who have diversity officers, would take it upon themselves to do those verifications. Sometimes we get verifications, every other day. And then sometimes we don't get those payment verifications until towards the end of the project, by which time, as people have said, we've already funded the project with our non-payment, and because we still have to pay our employees. I can't tell my employees that I can't pay you. I still have to pay them. I can in some cases slow that down to my subs, but some of my subs are as small as I am. So I appreciate what you said, Steve, and ask you as an owner to challenge other owners to put in place some of the things that you have at WashU, some of the things that are at MSD, Airport City, and others in the county, so that you are being proactive in making sure the contractors are paying those suppliers, especially the diverse suppliers. Thank you so much for listening.
Brian Holscher with MSD.
Yeah, I'll just be real quick, kind of hitting on one of Ron's issues. So, and mechanically, so just contractually with our primes wrapped around a diversity program, when they make a commitment to use a diverse firm for whatever dollar amount, and regardless of tier, our contracts make the utilization and payment of that subcontractor a requirement of the prime. So there's a contractual mechanism we have. We're often dealing with people. That doesn't mean you don't have the same delay of getting to a third tier prime, at least the way we make the payment. But as they claim the utilization, which we're tracking, which is our contractual obligation, we also then go back and double check to make sure the payments are also being made in line with the actual utilization as the contracts move forward. So it's only available to diverse companies. There's nothing like that. Steve Sobo's comment about we're willing to hear from anybody and try and resolve the issue outside of Ron's legitimate concerns. I just want to let everybody know that's available.
Rosalind Croft with Tarleton.
Good morning. I just wanted to say that some of us have been around a long time, and we remember when if we submitted our pay apps by the 25th of the month, by the 14th we were paid, whether we were a diverse contractor or not. And so I think if we could get owners and get back to that, I know there's a lot more compliance issues and things we have to turn in, but I think if we got back to that, then we wouldn't have as many issues with the money funneling downstream. But that's our biggest hurdle when we turn in our pay app and it's 30, 60, or 90 days before we get paid. That's another issue also.
Fran, is it okay if I go ahead and just start with my comments?
Yes, there's nothing else in the chat box.
Okay. So, hi, my name is, for people who don't know me on the call, my name is Corey Elliott, and I am a CEO and founder of CMT. CMT started as a roofing company. We have expanded since then, 10 years in the business with offices in not only Missouri, but also Illinois. In Missouri, we are a self-performing subcontractor for abatement, demolition, and roofing. In the Illinois market, we are a construction manager GC who can self-perform, but we don't always. And what I've really seen, and I'll say this before I say anything, I am going to be as respectful as I can, but not only do I deal with these issues every single day, but I talk to contractors who deal with these issues every single day. I remember a public employee telling me 4 or 5 years ago, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, Corey, you just need to write it in the contract. You just need to read your contract. You just need to do this. You just need to do that, blah, blah, blah. So I said, okay, tell me what language I should put in each contract to get paid. Tell me what language I should put in the contract to request retainage be released. As an abatement contractor, I'm in and out, right? As a demo contractor, I'm at the front end. I just got a check from a project for retainage from 4.5 years ago. Okay, so, and that's 10%. And I don't know what your margins are, but 10% is a lot of my profit. Okay, so that piece. So what that person told me to do was, one, don't change the don't accept paid when paid. They'll change it. Ask for what you want. So I literally picked the next 30 contracts to do that. I also put in the language, release of retainage after substantial completion of my, my portion of it within 30 days. Those were the 2 things that I put in. In 30 contracts, I was successful in getting it changed twice, right? Not only that, what I've also realized in this is, yes, we can have legal counsel review every contract and do all that. That's also an additional cost. But when it comes to a conflict with that contract, right? All of these other companies can out-legal us, right? I mean, they can take 9-10 months to go through, a contract dispute, whereas we cannot necessarily afford to do that. So I hear conceptually a lot of times what people say we contractors need to do, but in reality, that doesn't always work. The other piece and this is a silly example, but I like to use it. Build-A-Bear, okay? I love Build-A-Bear. I have 4 kids. I used to go all the time. As a contractor, it would be the equivalent of me saying to Maxine Clark, hey, I'm gonna come in your store and make my bear. I'm gonna use your bear for 30, 60 days before I pay you anything, right? If I like it or if I don't, I might pay you, say the bear's $100, I might pay you 20, I might pay you 50, 60, 30 days later, I might pay you another 20, 50. And then I'm gonna play with that bear for a year or 4.5 years, and then I'll give you the other $10 for that bear. It doesn't work in any other industry except for construction. I can be a contractor, and I'm saying this hypothetically. I can be a contractor for Ameren and get paid in 90 or 120 days, but I can't not pay my electric bill, right, for 90 to 120 days. And so the good or bad in this is that I've been an owner and I've also been a contractor. And the only people that can change this really honestly are the owners, but it is always put on whatever level sub. I've been a prime, I've been a, subcontract, all of that, but I don't have the control to write that check. The only people who have the control to write that check are the owners. And those are the people that should be having the conversation. When Fran opened this, here's the consequence of not paying us. And Steve, you hit it right on the head. The consequence of not paying us is that we go out of business and there's not capacity in the market, right? The consequence of not paying us is that then we don't hire other diverse people to work on these projects. Because when you look at these companies, the higher percentages of diverse workforce are at diverse companies, not the other way around. And so there's a domino of that. There's also, from an owner standpoint, there's a cost impact for you all, because now when I'm bidding something, I give you good, better, best based on how you're going to pay me, right? And so if I know that it's $1.8 million project and I'm going to be out, and this is a real example, if I'm on a $1.8 million project and I don't get $1 of payment and I'm $465,000 into that job, and my line of credit is $250 with another $150 if I want to do factoring or anything that costs money, right? I'm either going to have to decide to not do another project with that, or it's going to impact my performance on the project, because I've got 30 guys or 35 or 50 guys on a project that have to be paid by union requirement noon on Friday, right? With their dues paid by the end of the month with no payment. I mean, just again, I keep telling people, do the math. You know, somebody said, well, Corey, do the math. You know, no, you do the math. 1.8, you owe me 465,000. I've been on this project 4 months. This is what the contract says, right? And you know, what are we doing? And then as a contractor, again, if I go to the, say if I'm a prime, you know, and I'm priming to a GC, and I go to the owner, then that GC says, Corey, why are you involving my owner in my client in this conversation? Well, I've been talking to you for 4 months, right? I've been talking to you for 4 months. So at what point do I do that without there being ramifications? You all know this, I am very vocal, you know. I spend in my 60+ hour work week, 20 to 25 hours plus chasing money. That is 20 to 25 hours that I'm not growing my company, that I'm not building talent in my company, that I'm not developing myself and others, that I'm not giving back to this wonderful community that I'm a part of. I should not have to spend that amount of time chasing money. And again, when we talk about it or when we ask it, it is always pushed back on us as the issue. And I have a ton of respect for WashU for getting involved in a project with me where I was having an issue. Didn't have to do it, just wanted to help. And I think that they really saw through that process, you know, that there are issues that need to be addressed. If it's a direct pay program, excellent. It should be automatic. It should not be, hey, you know, your diverse subs on there because there's a participation requirement usually, or the owner is asking for a certain percentage of their project. So you know that up front. So give those, you know, put those in there automatically. Here's our bank account number. Here's the this, here's the that. Let us know what you need. If there's an issue on a lien waiver or not a lien waiver, on an AIA or a pay app, let's have that discussion. If there's a client that, you know, hey, I was an owner before, I was on the owner side before I started this company. AIAs are excellent. They're not hard, they're just not intuitive. And a lot of times, if there's not a schedule of values that was agreed on beforehand, people don't understand how and what to bill for. And there's nuances in that too. Do you project? Do you not project? What do you do? And so even if you have standard payouts, now I'll tell you what we do now. You know, someone in Chicago told me this idea and I do it now. I create all of the pay apps up front for a project based on the schedule. Based on my schedule. And so now all I have to do is update it. I've been working with project managers now to say, hey, here's the pay apps, here's the sequence, you know, it's going to be, you know, a 9-month project, here are the 9, you know, this is what will be going. And I do that up front. Everybody doesn't do that, but maybe there's an opportunity to do so. Or if you know the duration is going to be that, then, you know, in some way, make it automatic, The other thing that I was going to comment on, are the questions about payment. Again, when we start asking upfront about, you know, hey, can you pay us every 10 days, every 30 days, whatever that is, you know, those questions about, your ability to do the work. You know, or with suppliers, they'll say, oh, well, they'll say, well, we want a joint check, right? We, as a, you know, and so then I then have to go negotiate with my supplier about a joint check. Well, if you pay me, I can pay my supplier, right? So that's red flags. And then the supplier, then, if you're always only joint checks with them, then you never are able to establish, you know, an excellent line of, you know, credit or whatever with that supplier. So again, there are so many other things that impact payment. Also, you know, when I talked before about borrowing money, a lot of smaller firms, our interest rates are higher. And so again, we're borrowing money at, you know, 6, 10, 12%, and our profit isn't that much more. And so I hope that this will ultimately be addressed. You know, Ron has carried this water for a long, long time. And I know that there are a lot of contractors who aren't willing to be vocal about this. I also know there are a lot of contractors who are dying on the vine today because they're on major projects and they are not being paid. And they would rather suffer in silence and just try to figure it out. And, you know, I wish I had a new BMW from at least one project, but, you know, leveraging your house and your everything to make sure that your employees are paid and your contractors are paid and your suppliers are paid, you know, instead of owners saying, hey, I have a $400 million project. I have a 25 or 30% requirement, and every single person on this project will be paid by this date. No questions, no argument, no negotiation. And I'll just say this because we always go back to contract, they start off well, okay? The best written contract, they start off well. I get my first pay app, boom. I get my second pay app, boom. Third pay app, next pay app after that, next pay app, you know, and then retainage. Like I said, I literally just got retainage from a project that I did 4.5 years ago. And I will end with this. I truly, truly believe in this industry. It has been 10 years. I still cannot point to more than 5 contractors who do over $1 million in revenue in this market that are still here. So if we really, really, really want this industry to change, and we really, really want small businesses, not just diverse, small businesses to strive and grow and be fantastic in this industry, you guys have to fix payment. That should be no question. Don't talk to me about design. Don't talk to me. How are you going to pay me on this? Because I perform the work well. My team works their butt off every single day on these projects, and those families deserve to be paid. That's all I have.
Brian Holscher with MSD has his hand up.
Work? There we go. Corey, you mentioned the thing about Build-A-Bear. So I thought about MSD, and this doesn't have anything to do with this conversation, but on average, just so everybody understands, MSD gets paid 75 days after we start service. I know that doesn't really have anything to do with this conversation, but I thought just a little context. I love the Build-A-Bear instance, and I know it's not apples to apples.
No, but it absolutely is consistent with this though, because I'm sure, I don't do MSD work, but I'm sure, but I will, because you guys have a lot of stuff coming up. But that is pertinent, right? Because if I do MSD work and I know that I'm not going to get paid for 75 days,
Yeah.
You know, that's work. That is honestly why I don't pursue work, right?
Right. So that's not what I meant. MSD to take your wastewater, we get paid on average 75 days after we provide the service. So I was just doing a relative. Our payment, I hope, is much faster. I know, at least to the primes, it's within usually 20 days, as long as everything works out, and we do, obviously, with the multiple tier, but I'm just throwing it out. You made the Build-A-Bear comparison. Just so you understand, you guys are paying us on average 75 days after we take the wastewater away from your home. So just wanted to offer that.
Any other questions?
Okay, well, I'm gonna jump in because we are at 9:33 and we promised that this would be over at 9:30. Thank you so much to everybody who contributed. Obviously, this is a critical discussion. Corey, I know everybody's heard you and I appreciate your comments. And obviously the goal for the SLC3 is to bring the owners together and bring all of you together and collaborate and work towards solving problems, right? That's what we're here for. So for all those owners that agreed to be here today after I talked to you separately or asked, I really appreciate you being here because I see you and I just want to acknowledge that. And then for all of you and everything you contributed. Jane, thanks for organizing. I really appreciate you being the chair of our subcommittee. Those who want to be on that subcommittee and really push towards solving problems, please contact me. I would love to add you. Obviously, it's not a ton of work, but your voice is incredibly important, and we need action. People of action is what we really need. So thank you so much. Have a great rest of the day. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kelly, did you want us to stay on at all or no?